Hi there, and thank you so much for being here. So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about Lab 7 this week, or this Thursday rather. And I'm also going to walk you through the first SPSS tutorial, which is basically just an introduction into SPSS. So for Lab 7 this week, you guys are going to work together with your group members and complete 3 SPSS tutorials. So you might recall that SPSS is a software program that was specifically designed for scientists conducting research and needing a platform to analyze the data that they collected. And so SPSS is a wonderful tool, and it's fairly easy to use. And it will also save you a lot of work in the long run if you're planning to conduct your own independent research as a psychology major, because it's much less intense and time-consuming than conducting statistics by hand. So really these tutorials are designed to help you to learn the skills that you would need to conduct everything from very basic statistics all the way up to very, very advanced statistics using this program. So fortunately, the psychology department decided that all of the students who were taking this course online, instead of having to go to the computer lab to access SPSS, you guys have all been given your own free copy of the program. So if you haven't already, go ahead and pause the video and look in your email for a message from a company called On the Hub. That is the company that we purchased this software from. And you'll need to find that email and download the software. Hopefully you won't have any issues downloading it, but if you do, in my announcement, I also included the phone number of someone you can contact through IT, the company's IT, so that they can help you make sure you have it downloaded. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to assume you have now downloaded your software and you're ready to start the first tutorial, which provides an introduction to SPSS. So just real quickly, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show you where to find all of the documents that you'll need for lab number 7 this week. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to log onto Canvas and scroll down all the way to the bottom here under Module 8, and I have Lab 7 SPSS tutorials. Okay, so all of the videos are going to be here for you to watch. And I've also included PDFs. So these are step-by-step guides, and they're the same guides that I'm using for the tutorial. So the best way to watch this video is going to be to follow along in the guide. So let's go ahead and open the guide for an introduction to SPSS, which is the module that we are currently, or the tutorial that we're currently doing. Okay? So what I would like you to do is read this entire first page and go ahead and answer the questions. Okay, so this provides just a review of what's a categorical variable, what's a continuous variable, and it asks you to generate a couple of different examples of those types of variables. And then on page 2, we're actually going to start with SPSS. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is make sure the software is downloaded and do the first page on your own, and then this video will start with the second page. Okay, So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my copy of SPSS. So I'm going to go to Applications here, IBM SPSS Statistics 27. Okay, and then I'm going to click on SPSS Statistics. Okay. And that's going to open up the software program. Sometimes it takes just a couple of minutes to load. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so most of the time when you first open SPSS, you're going to encounter this screen, okay? So for right now, we don't actually need to use an SPSS data set, but we will in future tutorials. So for now, I'm just gonna click Close, and we're going to create our own data set, okay? So you might notice, I'm going to go full screen here. So you might notice at the very bottom of the screen, there are two different views. So we are currently in data view, but before we do anything else, we're going to need to go to variable view. Okay, so this is variable view, okay? So this is going to show you all of the different variables that are listed in your data set, right? But remember, we're entering our own data. So let's say, hypothetically, we are trying to create an SPSS data set. And one of our participants is Johnny. And Johnny is a 6-year-old boy of Asian descent with an IQ of 110, okay? So think about, based on that description, all of the different variables that we have to input data for, right? So when we're ready to input our variables, the first column we're gonna concern ourselves with is name, okay? And if we think about that description of Johnny as being 6 years old, of Asian descent, male, with an IQ of 110, right? We have, right away, we have age. So I'm just gonna type in age. And then I'm gonna type in race. And then I'm gonna type in gender. And then I'm going to type in IQ. Okay. So by themselves, these names, some of them are self-explanatory, right? But they're not really that descriptive. So one of the neat things we can do is we can navigate over to the 5th column here, and under label, we can put more of a detailed description of each of these variables that we're measuring. So for example, under IQ, we could put in intelligence score, okay? And that'll tell us what IQ represents. Okay. So the next thing we need to do after we've entered our variable names and we've entered our descriptive labels for one of our variables. Next, we need to decide what type of variables we are going to input, okay? Because that's going to determine the type of statistical tests we can do, okay? So let's start with age. Okay, so what type of variable is age? Okay, so age is a numerical value, right? So because it's a numerical value, we know that it is continuous, okay? So under measure here, we are going to select scale. Okay, so scale is just what SPSS calls continuous variables. Okay, race, on the other hand, is a categorical variable, okay, because there are different levels of the variable race. So we're going to input nominal, okay, because again, this isn't a quantitative measure, and all we have in terms of what the variable represents is a name for the variable. We don't have an order of magnitude or equal intervals or anything like that. So it's a nominal variable. Okay, gender, it's a nominal measure, excuse me. It's on a nominal scale of measurement, so it's nominal. And gender is also categorical, and it's also nominal. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select nominal here. And IQ is continuous. Okay, so now that we have determined our measures and on which type of variables they are and which scale we can use to compute those variables. Okay, now we need to go back to our categorical variables. So we need to go back to race and gender, okay? Because with categorical variables and with nominal variables or ordinal variables, we're going to input a value, but because those values are not numeric, right? Those values are basically just a stand-in. So those values are going to be an arbitrary signifier of the different levels that we have, okay? So we have to give SPSS, we have to tell SPSS what our arbitrary numbers signify, okay? So for example, let's go over here to gender, and let's go over to, let's click on gender. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna click on gender and we're gonna go to values. Okay, and here's where we're going to do our dummy coding process. So remember I talked about dummy coding in the scales of measurement video? Right? So just arbitrarily, I'm gonna go ahead and input a 1 and have that represent male. And then I'm gonna click add. And then I'm gonna input a 2 and have that represent female. Okay. So that's how SPSS is going to code my categorical variable, right? I've given it the levels of the variable that it will need, okay? And again, this is a dichotomous variable because there are 2 levels. Okay, so then I'm gonna go back up here to race, and I'm gonna do the same thing. Okay, so just arbitrarily, I'm gonna start at 1, and I'm gonna enter the different data set, or the different races of the individuals in my data set. So 3 is gonna represent Hispanic. Okay, so now I've inputted all of the different levels of my categorical variable for race. Okay, so now we have all of the different variables that we're going to be inputting data for available in our SPSS spreadsheet or our data set. Okay, so now it's time to scoot over to data view to actually input our data, right? So you'll notice that now in our data sheet, it's not blank, right? We now have columns for each of our variables, okay? So what are we looking at here? Well, once we get to data view, we see that each column will contain all the data for a given variable, right? So this column will contain all the data that we have about the ages of our participants, and this column will contain all the data we have about the race of our participants, and so on, okay? So the columns represent all the data we have for each of these variables, and the rows are going to represent all the data we have about a specific person, okay? So we want to input all of Johnny's data, okay? So all of his data is going to be input in the first row here, okay? So for example, we know that Johnny is 6 years old, and we know that his IQ is 110, okay? And now the last thing we have to do is input his categorical data, right? So we have to input what his race, what level, okay, which level of the race variable he belongs to, and which level of the gender variable he belongs to, okay? So you might recall that he is of Asian descent. So we're gonna input a 4 there. And he is male. So we're gonna input our arbitrary value of 1 there. Okay, and we could also use the down arrow to select whatever variable we're measuring, okay, or whatever, to select whatever level of the gender variable is appropriate, okay? And you can also do this for the race variable, okay? And you see all your levels there. If your SPSS is not doing that, there's a really easy fix if you go to View and make sure that value labels are checked. Okay, alrighty. So I've got some questions for you on the SPSS tutorial that you can answer on your own. But after you do that, you should be done with this first tutorial, okay? Okay, so this concludes my first video providing a tutorial and an introduction to SPSS. So I will see you in my next tutorial video. Bye, guys.